Let's talk about this week in Dragonflight, where honestly a lot's going on. Number one then, Mythic Plus. So when you look at these dungeons, two things, they have plenty of mechanics, and because the difficulty now scales from plus, well, I mean, scales as it scales, but from plus 10 to plus 20, it scales by an extra 2% per keystone level, and rewards are extended to 20. And that has really led to a lot of people just finding these dungeons to be very hard. It's that kind of thing, we've been doing them in and around, okay, I've been out of the game for a bit, but when we were doing them, it was like maybe 8, 9, 10, and it was like totally fine.
I've been doing a bunch of like 11s and 12s, and they're all right.
I think though, when people are pressing like 16s, 17s, they're really starting to have issues. And whenever we saw the basically the spread of how many people were clearing dungeons at certain keystone levels,
the 24 was like the hard wall for some of them.
Yeah,
most of them actually.
Yeah. So when we look at this, then, okay, reduce damage of triggering a hail bomb by 40%. There you go, 40% nerf. Reduce party-wide AoE damage on the initial cast of hail bombs by 66%.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the issue in like design-wise comes from. I guess the best analogy I can use here is you're playing Dark Souls, right? You're playing Dark Souls, you're playing Sekiro or something. In those games, you have with enough player skill, you can take 0 damage. You have iframes, you have parries, you can not take damage, and then it doesn't matter if you do like 1 damage per hit, you can eventually beat the boss, but you can not take any damage. With a lot of how they've designed Dragonflight dungeons, specifically Dragonflight dungeons, not the old ones that are rotated in, there's a lot of unavoidable damage. There's a lot of, no, this is just a thing for your healer to do. No matter how good you are, you have to manage defensives and you have to manage healer ability for this. And when you scale too high, that becomes a, no, you literally can't. You have to outgear this. You can't outskill this. And this is obviously, that's been one of the things people have been complaining about the most.
And it goes to the reason why me and you would always prefer Tyrannical, because we're maybe more old crusty players who are like, dungeons are about bosses. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of players who are really like big Mythic Plus key pushers, I believe, it's like Tyrannical can just scale boss mechanics to the point where you just have to do really cheesy shit to get around them. And I think this is a pretty good example of that. And as Blizzard themselves say, the initial on-cast hit was never intended to be a large source of damage, and when scaled up, it's more damage than we'd like. So, yeah. Of course, as a healer, I'm the prime beneficiary of this. Good. But we're seeing a lot. Blaze Hoof, reduced period damage of Searing Winds by 25%. Scorched Earth, also 25%. Wise Mary now dies immediately and grants players credit for the encounter upon defeat. Happy. But even look at this. Lorewalker Stone Step. Intensity damage decreased 40%. Agony decreased 40%. 40 appears to be their number this time around.
It always was. It was in Sepulchre.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was jailer damages by 40%.
Lots. I mean, oh yes, they've new orbs.
Yeah, they look very clean now. They look way better than before.
Yeah, so that's pretty good.
The old shitty orbs that you couldn't see the edge of. So there's a lot of really nice little, I guess, readability changes they're doing there. Obviously, someone pointed out in chat, can't remember who it was, said, I wish they would do accessibility updates for combat because I can't see anything and they really lack visual clarity. Fair. So that's like the one thing they maybe need to work on, but that's a harder problem than this. This has been them generally going, oh yeah, it's hard to see the edges of this. Now you can see the edges of it. I go, good, fantastic actually, wonderful. But I think Stone Steps nerfs are pretty heavy there because that wasn't really a boss. That was always is this a boss? Is this not a boss? Is this just an interesting trash all the time? So, good.
Yeah, for not good offensive. There's a thing where multiple people could use the ballista and they'd all fire an arrow and it would do like loads of boss damage. So they've they fixed that. For other things though, like in Academy, updating a little bit of like enemy forces credit, which I mean, who knows if that'll perhaps unlock some new routes. I don't really know. Burial Grounds, some issues fixed with Ner'zhul, some Thundering stuff fixed with Azure Vaults, but then we move from this over to changes to classes and specs. And the thing here is, they're not nerfs. Actually, they seem to be more taking the opinion of raising up, which I like.
And that's the fun thing, right? Because say you are sitting there and go, well, our dungeons are too hard. maybe, obviously, you could argue raid. Maybe you want to tune the dungeon raid separately in PvP and stuff. But I think one of the things that is obvious across all, if you learn about how players' experience changes, if you buff a player's character, they're going to be happy. They're going to feel good about themselves. So why nerf a dungeon raid when you can buff a player? As long as it works on PvP or you ignore it in PvP or something. So the fact that they're saying, going, we'll buff players, is like, yeah, do more of that, do it all the time. Everyone will be like, yes, please.
Yeah, so Vengeance basically is more tanky.
Yep.
So they'll like that. You have got a 3% all ability damage.
I do. That buff does come slightly at the cost of the talent changes. Tuning slight amounts of damage. I know they reverted a lot of those. But I think there'll be a little bit of... it probably won't be doing much more damage because we're kind of strong as it is. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. I am doing so much more damage than a lot of our group in like AoE, despite having lower item levels. Great. I love it. Please don't nerf us.
Devastation. Well, 10% increase in Fire Breath, not in PvP. We see another 5 and then 10% increase for the Lay Waste talent, which makes Deep Breath do more. Eternity Surge, 10%. Firestorm, 20%. Eye of Infinity generates 2 essence on crit instead of 1. Just buffs.
Definitely feels like they needed it. I have seen... Maybe it's because it doesn't play all that well, or maybe it's because people kind of don't like the fantasy of the DPS versus the healer. But man, I have seen so few DPS invokers the entire time. It's crazy. I've not seen that many healers, but I've seen none of them.
Survival Hunter. All ability and pet damage up by 2%. Butchery and Carve, 10%. Fury of the Eagle, 10%. Wildfire Bomb damage, 15%. Nice. Mage.
M plus buffs. Yep.
Now this is... oh boy, ain't this the business. Because Mage is like Arcane, eating good.
Pumping hard.
Very, very high IQ. Fire and Frost, big struggle. But no, we see Flame Strike increase by 15%. Living Bomb increase by 25%. So I guess that's nice for the Fire AoE. For Frost... Frostbolt damage increased by 20%.
That's not going to matter much.
Ray of Frost by 40%. Again, 40.
You know what's going to be really funny?
Yeah.
It's going to be really funny when you go and see, right, what does Ray of Frost seem like it's worth taking now despite a 40% increase, and it's not. And you'll get to go, Blizzard, come on. How can you not look at the number and go, that's smaller, make it bigger again?
Yeah.
But...
Time for Glacial Spike, then.
I still feel they need to make Glacial Spike the ability to take. Everyone wants that. Everyone except people who want to play it easier, I think. I think most people like Glacial Spike, especially if they had... Like, shattering one of those is so fun all the time.
I really like that when in Legion, I really like that. Yeah. Monks, then. So, the efficacy of Stagger against magical damage is increased by 10%. That's pretty big. Cooldown of Celestial Brew is 45 instead of 60 seconds.
That feels like a pretty big buff. Although I see people saying the frost buffs do nothing for mages. They're still not viable. So,
makes sense.
It's almost as if they looked and went, we'll do something. But it's the power of that Icy Vein stuff. That's the problem. Especially because Rune of Power and if you reduce the cooldown of Icy Veins enough, you get an extra Rune of Power out of it because it's attached to it. So there's those like little synergies that they need to patch up. But I would like to hope 10.07 has mage changes because mages, mages who aren't playing Arcane aren't happy.
Mistweaver. All healing by 5% buff. Vivify, another 5%. Blackout Kick damage increase 6%, Rising Sun Kick 8%, Tiger Palm 15%, Spinning Crane 5%. Awakened Phaeline being 7% of Spinning Crane kicks damage into healing where it was 60, so I guess Fist Weaving buffs and general buffs. Now, Paladins.
Yeah, this is so necessary, it's unbelievable.
So, it is not just the changes. Okay, Crusader Strike damage increased. Again, our favorite number of today, 40%. Blade of Justice, 25%. Final Reckoning, 15%. Shield of Vengeance's cooldown is 90 seconds instead of 120. But most importantly, Blizzard have said, some of Retribution's main rotational buttons don't feel as good to press as we'd like, so we're making some changes to help improve these. Additionally, their survivability is not where they'd like it to be. And they finally say, we are looking at Retribution as a whole, and we'll have more to share in the future. So that is heavily suggesting maybe not a full rework, but it's it's heavily suggesting significant work to the spec.
Yeah.
This is what I mean, how many times before this expansion came out did we have like loads of paladins in our chat, loads of paladins super chatting, everyone just saying, we feel like Ret needs more. I mean, amongst other things, of course. But there you go. I suppose they truly have listened. We'll have to see, obviously, if they have the same idea as players as to what is good, what is better. But, like, once more, we, in any previous expansion, like, Bear Druids would not have an AoE rage dump until 11.0 if this was Shadowlands. Right?
Yeah.
Like, Ret wouldn't get looked at until 11.0 if things were going the way they normally did. But
yeah.
No.
Like, this time last year, I'd have said, don't look at Ret, you'll make it worse. And this time I'm going, cool. That means it's going to get fixed. But a lot of that is me coming from Feral Druid. And my God, I feel like it's a whole different world. I've had so much.
You're so happy in that.
I've had so much fun. Not since playing Prot Palette and Legion have I been so happy with my class. I'm just sitting there going, this is wonderful. And then even the fact that because of how the game works, if I need to flex heal like I did on Rasagath, I can just flex heal. And I can just press my healing button instead because all I need are trinkets and a weapon. Obviously, stat parity is technically not ideal, but the fact that I have two specs that do two different roles and I can flex them. I also flex tank, although I don't enjoy that as much. But it's so good. It's so good. Both are great. So if they can make Ret get changes on the level of Feral and start to feel as good again, because it's not even starting from as bad a spot, I think. I think the Ret changes are largely like, it doesn't need that much change to be a lot better, which means if they give it a lot of change, it could be insanely better. Because I think it might need a little bit of a more solid redesign because it's a bit simple. And I don't know if they'd be too worried about that. But I think it's going to be I'm excited. I'm hoping, and this is insane to me, I'm hoping by at some point in this expansion, I can actually play my Paladin, get her to level 70 and have a good time instead of just quietly seething. Because I did the 60 to 61 in like a couple minutes trick in Revendreth.
Oh yeah.
And I was just, the whole time I was just like, I'm just pressing, like, I'm just praying for Wake of Ashes resets and smashing Divine Storm and then just like pianoing my keys otherwise, because there's no reason to not do that. If you're just doing it, I'm just like, versus me trying to play the same approach as Feral, where I'm like, oh yeah, I get to multi-dot. Oh, I got my Tiger's Fury resets. Oh, I get to Thrash when it comes up with clear casting. Oh, I get my Brutal Slash. I get Primal Wrath, and that'll just feel so much better. So hopefully it gets a bit fixed.
Yeah, and there's more. So Holy Priests are getting another 3%. Currently
don't know if they need it. I think, but sure.
Like, I think me and the Popular Guild are like the only two disc priests and Taliesin. There's three disc priests.
There's so
left.
few parses for you guys.
There's not that many parses, which is fine because I can get that high damage parse. Let's not talk about the healing parse. Let's not talk about that.
So Eric does all the work, right?
Yeah. For Shadow. Shadow, we're not quite in the mage tier. Oh man!
But you don't have a good spec to swap to.
Yeah, well, that really would be the issue. So yes, Shadow is just getting a whole bunch of damage increases as well, specifically for single target. Going to Rogue, it's quite funny. When have we heard this before, Matt? As we monitor the developing M+ meta, we have recognized Outlaws overperforming.
Blizzard.
Wow!
Have you ever heard of an ability called Blade Flurry? You might want to look into the design space of that, or figure out to do something with it.
Dude, that's so funny.
Because the idea of, okay, here's Outlaw. You don't like having Blade Flurry downtime, so we will give you Blade Flurry uptime. Oh no, you're doing 47 times the damage of every other spec in the game in AoE. What could have caused this? And there's just this like massive shadow of Blade Flurry standing over the dead. I'm like, oh no, what could this ever be? I know what we'll do. We'll give them Blade Flurry downtime. And then Outlaw just quits and goes back to praying for poison bombs again.
Yeah.
So I think it's weird because it's really good. They just need to find a spot for it where it works. Because maybe it even needs like, Blade Flurry needs to be weak by default and then give it like a moment where you can turn it on properly. Like because you don't want a passive version of it, but you want to have like, say, during X ability, that's like a baseline ability. I'm not even sure. Like maybe, something maybe between the eyes or something. Like if between the eyes is up and blade flurry is up, you do more damage or something like that. Even though that would kind of suck, it would still rein in the power of it a little bit.
Yeah, I get the design problem with what is a very satisfying usability.
Yeah.
As we move on to Warlocks, well, Athlocks, you are getting Agony damage increase 5%, Corruption 5, Drain Soul 10, Pandemic Invocation 20, Seed of Corruption 5, Shadowbolt 10, Siphon Life 10. That's for the Athlocks. That's kind of interesting. Destro, who, at least per this Wowhead data from, well, them pulling, of course, from Warcraft logs a few days ago.
What
Destro.
is that?
Now, this is all. I chose not to
all
go.
All percentiles heroic? Okay.
Yeah. I chose not to go for 95th percentile because, so I don't know if it's the last time I talked about it, but way back in Mists of Pandaria, Windwalker Monk was like, in the hands of the right player, so powerful.
Crazy.
The averages were very different from that. Yeah. So I don't like looking at 95% because that doesn't always take into account like difficulty and stuff like that. I do feel that the overall numbers, they actually capture more of the overall player base, which ultimately it's, look, this is one of those things in every single game. Take a game like Overwatch 2, right? What was the new character that's for the Valorant players with the right click railgun?
Sojourn?
Sojourn. Sojourn probably total dirt in lower leagues.
Especially in my hands, terrible, useless.
Yeah, terrible. Buff Sojourn. Make her left click more powerful. Now you put that in the hand of a really good player, and now Sojourn is humongously overpowered. Please nerf. And it's always one of those problems when we're balancing games, and it's tricky.
Skill floors and ceilings.
Yeah. Who are we balancing for? But anyway, for Destro then, Channel Demon Fire 10%, Rain of Fire 15, Soul Fire 20, Infernal and Blasphemy Immolation, Damage 10%, Confragate 10%, Immolate 10%, Incinerate 15%. Yeah, so my lungs.
I would like to point out one thing that's very interesting.
Yes.
They did not nerf Demonology.
Yeah.
They probably, numerically, should have nerfed Demonology. Because I think Demonology is a little tiny bit of an outlier compared to the other two. So that's like that's the natural response, right? You see Warlock, you see, Demo doing a lot, Destro not doing much, after and less. You go, which one of these is the problem? The problem is that Demonology is too strong comparatively. So if we were to look at Warlock in isolation, you go, oh, well, if we bring Demonology down to match Destro and Afflick, then that's fine. That's it balanced. But that's the easy way out. That's the easy option. That's the change one set of numbers, you're fine. The harder thing is bring the other two up.
Yeah.
And they seem to be trying a little bit of that. Which is good.
Indeed.
Yeah. Demonology's middle of the pack, but it's less that it's the outlier overall. It's more that it's like if you look at Warlock in isolation, it seems like the right move is to bring them closer. But instead, I'll just bring these up a little bit.
Yeah, I think within a patch, just focus on making people feel better rather than achieve perfect balance, because there's a degree of pragmatism. And I think it's one of those things like you could scream, but I am right, till the cows come home. But ultimately, if you being perfectly right and taking the, most perfect objective, whatever, way of balancing something by nerfing a whole bunch of people, that'll just make people feel bad. And maybe that ain't pragmatic.